Welcome back, one and all, to another one of Nathan Bell's commentary videos. Nate always delivers the news, the goss on culture, politics, anything you want. It's all on his channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And today, Nate wants to talk about refugees.
Yeah, well, on the subject of refugees, really, I don't believe in nations. I believe in one earth. Like, I believe we all own the earth. We're all human beings. We're one species. So I see us all as one species, and we should all view each other as brothers and sisters and family, as one human family. We all come out of Africa. We all come from one space. You know, we all evolved as one species. We're not separate species. So I really believe that anyone should be able to live anywhere on the earth that they want, where they want to live. And really, my view is that if I was in charge, I would welcome anyone to Australia as long as they're sincere and genuine good people. Let anyone come and live here. And I really think a lot of hatred towards refugees is rooted in ignorant, racist views. One of the interesting things I've done in my book, Kings of the New Age, The Quest of the Balancing Stones, is there's been an atomic war in the Northern Hemisphere in my book, and 200 million refugees have come to Australia. And many of them have come from America and are white, and have come from Europe and are white. And so many of them have also come from Asia. But what I'm trying to say in the book is, like, what would you do if there was a nuclear war and half the world turned up here? Would you reject them and turn them away? You can't. Not after a nuclear war. And our people, if a bunch of if America got the shit bombed out of them tomorrow, and a million refugees turned up from America, a million white middle-class refugees turned up from America, I guarantee you half these racist Aussies who hate Arabic refugees would welcome the Americans. You know, it's all just racism, and a lot of it's just hatred and ignorance. Because if a bunch of white middle-class Americans turned up tomorrow, they would be welcomed. Now, it's interesting. Because different groups have turned up throughout history, and there have been white groups turned up who've received hatred. I think in different parts of the world, different white groups have turned up and have received hatred. So I don't think it's all about skin colour. I think a lot of it, I think there's some part where we don't want outside groups coming into our territory. It's like some tribal instinctual thing where it's like, this is our space, keep out, we have to protect ourselves. It's a security thing. It's about, this is our community, don't invade our community or interfere with our space. So I think some part of racism is almost an instinctual defence thing. That's not to say it's okay, but I think it comes from a perceived threat, that there is a perceived threat of danger from outside groups entering into our territory. But really, like I said, I believe in one earth, and we should all view ourselves as a human family, and we should be able to move freely around the globe. Because I really wish we could abolish nations and just live as one human species and all be welcoming and loving to each other and all embrace each other as a family without all this racism and fear and hatred. And I think people should be able to move freely around the planet. Now, that being said, I do believe in I don't think that's a practical view, because the reality is all this hatred exists, and there are violent hate groups out there. So to some extent, we have to protect our community from violent people coming into the community who've been a part of extremist groups. And I do acknowledge that there are people who seek to come here to launch attacks on this country. There are people who are psychologically damaged, in my view, and suffer their own grievances and want to come here and kill people. So I do think there has to be some level of vetting for people involved in violent extremist groups. And I'm also hesitant about letting career criminals come into the nation, especially people who've been involved in very extreme mafia organisations around the world, because I know, because I study this stuff, how extremely violent some of these criminal organisations are, and how extremely psychopathic some of the members of these organisations are, and the sort of heinous crimes they commit. So I do think there has to be some level of vetting for people who've been involved in organised crime. But even then, I believe in forgiving people, and if someone wants to come here to start a new life and they've been involved in an extreme mafia group, or an extreme hate organisation, but they come here genuinely seeking to start afresh and to start a new life and to live a peaceful life, I believe in offering forgiveness. My only view about like I said, I believe that people who have been a part of violent groups, who, if they want to start afresh and they want to live a peaceful life, my only prerequisite for people coming to this country is that they don't want to bring violence or crime into the country. Outside of that, anyone should be able to come, and there shouldn't be any limitation. Let millions of people come to Australia. In my Australian Liberal Anarchy Party, I say, why don't we let millions of refugees into Australia and increase the population? Bigger population is good for the nation. Let people from all over the world come and live in Australia and make it a great multicultural nation with multiple millions of people from all over the world. Let it be the hive of humanity in Australia, and let there be people from every corner of the world living in this country and prospering. And let there be 200 million people in Australia from all over the world. Well, it's all this white Australia crap where it's just like people who just want whites here. And that's all it comes down to, is this racism towards refugees. It's just people who just want to live in a white Australia and they don't want to let anyone else in. My view is let everyone in. Let it be a multicultural nation of all ethnicities and all races living here in unity as one humanity. Let Australia be the great multicultural nation where everyone is welcome, and increase the population significantly. But there's these people who just want it to be majority white, and they're fixated on this idea of it must be majority white, and they don't want anyone but white people here. It's all, all this hatred towards refugees is just racism. Like I said, the only rational part of any of that hatred is to say there is a rational argument to say we shouldn't let people from extremist terrorist groups into this country, and we shouldn't let people involved in violent mafia organisations into this country because they will bring violence into this country. And there has to be some level of vetting for career criminals and people involved in terrorist organisations because they are dangerous people. And we have to acknowledge that there are those dangerous psychopathic killer types out there, but those people exist in the white population and in our own population as well. So it's not like you can't say, oh, any Arab we let here is a terrorist. That's just some racist rubbish. But we have to acknowledge there are psychopathic people all throughout the world. Psychopathy isn't a thing that belongs to one race or one group of people. There are psychopaths and killers everywhere. But we do have to have some level of protection for people indoctrinated into hate groups because they're dangerous people. But even then, it's not acceptable to lock people up in detention centres with terrible living conditions where they live in absolutely terrible situations and terrible conditions for years on end. People who haven't committed crimes, who are coming here out of desperation, shouldn't be treated like criminals. They are not criminals. They are people escaping war, and they are people escaping trauma and suffering, and they are seeking our help. We need to be a charitable nation that supports people coming from war-torn parts of the world where they have been subjected to torture and war and suffering. We need to welcome people who are coming from hardship and offer them a new life here in Australia. That's what a good person would do. Don't we want to be good people in this country? We should welcome people who are coming from hardship, and we should welcome them to start a new life here. And most people who come from war-torn countries, they are so grateful to be here. They're more grateful to be here than most Australians. And most refugees who come here work harder than most Australians because they actually have seen what the world is like in worse parts, and they actually understand that it's a blessing to be in this nation where it is safe and where we have good security. So they're actually very grateful to be here. And in some ways, I think they deserve to be here more than the privileged Australian who takes everything for granted. Most middle-class Australians and upper-class Australians just take this nation for granted. They've got no concept of what it's like to come from a war-torn country where there's death and suffering everywhere, or where there's immense poverty. People who come here from those situations are actually very grateful to be here, and they want to be a part of our community. And why would you reject someone who wants to join your community? Be a loving loving person. If someone comes and says, oh, you know, I've been through all this hardship and suffering, I really want to be a part of your community, I love your community, I'd be like, yeah, join my community. You know, welcome people in, be loving, be compassionate. But no, most, like, so many Australians are just racist and hateful, that they'd never have that attitude. So I really think the hatred towards refugees is just ignorant racism. But anyway, there's some thoughts on refugees. So drop a comment in the comment section about what your views are about refugees.